Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
So, Unlicensed Disintegration, what do you think about this card?
Still pretty good.
Pretty good? just a solid?
You know, like if you're in the market for like killing creatures or damage.
Yeah?
Yeah, if either one of those is relevant to your interests.
How many Unlicensed Disintegration might you play?
Typically, I would play 0 and be foolish. However, if I was playing any, I would play 4.
Yeah, about the same number that most people seem to be playing of a new card from Dominaria in their standard decks, Goblin Chainwhirler.
See, now I like the Chainwhirler a whole lot.
Yeah.
Goblin Chainwhirler is the type of card that gets me playing Unlicensed Disintegration.
Yeah. I think Goblin Chainwhirler and Unlicensed Disintegration were popular in combination with each other. But it's interesting to me, in the top 8 of Grand Prix Birmingham, there were a boatload, some might say a Heart of Kieran load, of Unlicensed Disintegration / Goblin Chainwhirler black-red decks. But they actually didn't agree on a whole lot of things. Like, you know, you think like, oh, this is just, these decks are all Heart, these decks are all Goblin Chainwhirler, these decks are all Unlicensed Disintegration, but they actually had a fair amount of variation, right? Like some were way more beatdown, some were way more control-ish, and some even though they had 1-drops, were like comboing with the 1-drops a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there was a really, you know, as far as like a top 8 almost entirely composed of red-black decks, there was a pretty good variety. I mean, just look at the 4 spot, right? Like, we saw Chandras, Karns, Rekindling Phoenixes, like even I don't think any Hazarets this time around. What does that tell you?
I don't think there were any Hazarets in the top 8, but there were Hazaret in the top 32. But yeah, a lot of you know, 2 Chandra and 2 Karn, or, you know, more numbers or alternate numbers. One of the things I thought was interesting is Soulscar Mage at the 1 instead of some of the other options. So there's all kinds of stuff at the 1. Almost always we see Bomat Courier, but what was amazing to me is some decks didn't even have Bomat Courier, which is interesting considering the fact that Bomat Courier is an artifact card that's basically a red card, and then combos so well with Unlicensed Disintegration. But we did see Soulscar Mage. Soulscar Mage, that's a cool combo, right?
Yeah, the just the -1/-1 counters. Like, or you're talking the Goblin Chainwhirler -1/-1ing their whole team.
Yeah, that's what
right. Like that's a great 1-2 punch, and it's something that we actually saw in a pretty big chunk of these decks. Basically, you know, any of these decks playing Chainwhirler, aka red decks, you know, they were interested.
Decks have Chainwhirler.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. It's not like there was a ton of competition at the 1 spot, and you know, Soulscar Mage has some other flexibility to it anyway, and it takes on all new meaning with the ability to be Chainwhirling. There's a different sort of 187 of sorts. I mean, I don't know what you even call it, but I was curious your thoughts on the use of the sideboard The Eldest Reborn in Matt Brown's 3rd place red-black aggro, you know, his 3rd place list in the sideboard. This is one of the, that's a saga?
It's an uncommon saga, right? So
yeah.
The Eldest Reborn, 4 and a B, for an uncommon enchantment saga. Chapter 1, each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Chapter 2, each opponent discards a card. Chapter 3, put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So this is like a kind of a cruel ultimatum, right?
You can't just say that about every single card.
I don't know. Is it kind of a cruel ultimatum? No?
I don't know, man. It's a lot of things. It's closer to a planeswalker, I guess, or, you know, like, I mean, this is like a number of different effects. If you mean that the power is spread out in a variety of places, I think it's more of a tome type of thing. I mean, it's a saga, right? Like, it's 3 different effects.
It's it's kind of a Coligan's command.
Dude, I don't think these words mean...
All right. So how does this card work? If your opponent has a sweet creature or planeswalker, and it's the only thing they have,
they won't have it for long.
Is the Eldest Reborn good on that turn? But what's great about this card is, like, if your opponent's low on cards or they're already down to, like, 1 or 0 cards in hand, even if you don't get your money on Chapter 2, you restrict their ability to play. It's awesome against a deck, let's say, that has no cards in hand and then rips a counter spell. Man, that's awesome. Or some kind of reactive spell. And then Chapter 3, if they had, like, a Karn, or a Chandra, or a Nicol Bolas, it's yours now, right? That's the payoff.
I particularly like it after sideboarding, where people have already cut their dead cards, and the matchups where this comes in are prone to be a little bit more attrition-y.
Yeah, a lot of these decks, I mean, even if you look at this deck in particular, Matt Brown's deck, he's one of the ones that's got, like, Bomat Courier in the main deck, as well as Soulscar Mage, so he's got some 1-drops. And then, what's also interesting to me is, like, the variety of creature removal that these decks are playing. I think that a lot like the Mardu decks from maybe 1 or 2 years ago, this deck is very apt to take out kind of the small dorky creatures and replace them with, like, powerful mid-range cards. He's got an extra land in the sideboard. Just ways to build advantages and use his mana, kind of like stretch out the utilization of his mana and card advantage over the course of many turns. And if he thinks his opponent is going to do the same thing, then the Eldest Reborn might be really good.
Yeah. It's definitely definitely good for the attrition matchups where people are trying to get the most they can out of their cards, even particularly if you're both trying to go a little bit bigger. Yeah.
The other thing is, as long as your opponent's not just, like, playing token creatures, like they're not just, SRAM's Expertising or something like that, any value off of the Eldest Reborns, Chapter 1 is probably okay because you're going to get 2 additional cards probably out of it. So it's still always going to be like a 3-for-1 and some free mana, right?
Yeah, and often even more. I mean, like, depending on what you're getting back with that creature or planeswalker, very often you're getting, that's an implied 2-for-1 right there in an awful lot of cases. Now, one of the cards that kind of caught my eye as a variation, most players, including the champion Simon Nielsen, had something like a Vraska's Contempt to round out their removal. But Matt Brown's got a copy, and he's actually got a copy of Hour of Glory. Yeah, it's interesting, Hour of Glory, because it's not like Hazaret and the Scarab God are at an all-time high.
Yeah, I've mostly seen this card in the sideboard of mono green decks. These mono green decks that are splashing for Scrapheap Scrounger, which I thought was unusual there also, right? But I don't know. This is the first time I've seen it in a red deck, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of it here? I assume that the biggest draw is the fact that it has only a single, just a single pip, whereas Vraska's Contempt would take double black, and Matt Brown is playing with, no swamps. Definitely from the Floresian school of don't play with swamp.
Well,
in a red deck.
I think the single pip, I often had one swamp. Remember, we played cards like whatever that one casting cost artifact was that could search your library for a basic. But anyway,
yeah. If you got something to go get it. I just mean the stray swamps that'll sometimes appear in the Boros decks, splashing unlicensed disintegration.
Sure. Yeah. So the single pip, just the fact that this card's an instant is also pretty compelling. I don't know. I think, is this deck cold to the Scarab God? Like, you definitely want an answer to it? I don't know. I think that part of it is also you're in a format where he's got 1 Cuts Ribbons in his deck, 3 Abraid's main deck, and 4 Unlicensed Disintegration. But, you referenced the champion, Simon Nielsen. Nielsen only played 3 Unlicensed Disintegration, and he played 2 Magma Sprays in his main deck, right? So there's this is a format where, and Brown's got 2 Doomfalls. I think that there is, some incentive for these decks to say, I want to have X number of point removal cards, but I want to create some amount of volatility in my point removal cards, and some are going to be way better in some cases, and just put those ones in when I want those ones in, right? Also, you can adjust for speed, you can adjust for power level depending on who you're playing against.
Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned adjusting for speed a little bit with the Eldest Reborn in Matt Brown's deck, but Simon Nielsen's got actually kind of an exotic discard spell of his own, Heartless Pillage. A Heartless Pillage out of the sideboard, 2 and a black, sorcery, target opponent discards 2 cards, and it has Raid. If you attacked with a creature this turn, create a colorless treasure.
This card is, I love it. I love it so much because it's so Brian Hacker to me. Hacker he would just play Stupors in his sideboard in a variety of black decks back in the day, and I'd be like, well, that seems like not that powerful of a card. It's not that focused or powerful of a sideboard card, especially because Hacker would play like Hatred deck sometimes. He played like a Necro deck sometimes. He was the innovator of the Bad Moon Necro deck, right? And I was like, well, why do you play Stupor? And he's just like, yeah, because sometimes you just, you're in a matchup and you have some bad cards and you want to take them out, but that might happen in like 5 different matchups. And you just don't have enough sideboard cards. So just like bring this in. It's always like pretty good to get some of the 2-for-1. I was just like, that's one way to look at it. It's probably not wrong, Dude,
I can relate. Back a little over a decade ago, I was rocking Vindicate in the sideboard. Vindicate. Who do you board it in against? Oh, mostly just people with permanents. But it was just this was in, at the time extended. But it was just, there were enough dead cards in my, I guess what would now be called an Obzon deck. There were enough dead cards that I just needed a card that I could bring in against everybody, even though I was taking out different stuff all the time.
Yeah, it's just like you just always have some, not always, but you so often have something bad, but it's something differently bad. And,
yeah.
And sometimes you're just like, I have too many bad cards and not enough sideboard slots, so like, here it is. And actually, the raid is pretty cool here, right? Like 3 until 5 can be pretty good when you have cards like Glorybringer, for example. I mean, just
Angrath out of the sideboard.
Excuse me, say again.
And the Angrath, the Flame Chained out of the sideboard,
or just even having a random artifact is good with Karn Sign of Urza.
Definitely.
I think that there's not enough. Given how many Karns there were in the top 8 of Birmingham, I think that there need to be more Karns. I mean, Karn is such an outstanding card.
All right, so if the line is 27.5 Karns in the top 8 of the Pro Tour, do you want the over or the under? And remember, this is legal now in America.
So 27.5. Wow. I would take. This is a standard Pro Tour, the one that's coming up in a few weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd still take the under. But it's probably wrong.
Exciting.
I was testing Black-Red decks with like 4 Karn, 3 Chandra last week, and I was not unhappy. I don't need any Rekindling Phoenix. That guy's just white cards beat him up. It's so depressing.
So you mentioned earlier Hour of Glory in the sideboard of mono green decks. Well, wouldn't you know, if you look at the 12th place finisher from that same Grand Prix, Raul Valagero, apologies from the name, but we have here a mono green deck with 2 Hour of Glories, as well as a Vicious Offering and 2 Vraska Relic Seeker.
Yeah, this is a great archetype, I think, and highly underrated. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with it. Raul went with 4 copies of Thrashing Brontodon in his main deck, 3 copies of Galta Primal Hunter. That's often a 4 of in this archetype because you get so much power from just having Ronus in your deck. So just like having Ronus and Steel Leaf and the acceleration from Llanowar Elves makes Galta like 2 mana on, turn 5 really often.
Right, and even when you pay 4, you're getting a 12/12 trample.
Yeah, it's real interesting. You just when you're doing the math and how much to pay for Galta, you just like count up how many lands you have, count up how much power you have. Does that add up to 12? It only added up to 11. Is one of your cards Atlanta War Elf? So that's pretty cool. Talk to me about Greenbelt Rampager. That's actually a card that I've cut from mine. Am I crazy for cutting it? It seems like it doesn't seem like it's a high performing card in this archetype to me.
It's a lot weaker than a Steel Leaf Champion. It's kind of like a Thrashing Brontodon that you never accidentally use. It is still a 3-mana 3/4, so it's like surprising to me. You're the king of 3-mana 3/3 no text. And Greenbelt Rampager is a 3-mana 3/4 that has the upside of you can like albino troll it into play. You can turn 1 Greenbelt Rampager, turn 2, play it again. Like, this is a deck where the only 1-drop is Land or Elf.
Yeah, I biased my deck a little bit differently. I played with Jade Light Ranger as well as Merfolk Branchwalker in mine.
What was your other one, though?
I only have Land or Elf. But Greenbelt Ranger isn't a real 1.
Well, no, it is, because when you do it on 1, then it's not a 3, it's a 2.
So, hear me out, though. But I also play with 4 copies of the 2-drop Kenra that you can flash back. So if you have like 8 Explore guys, the Kenra and Scrap Heap Scrounger, your mana flows really well, and you have like a really, really varied amount of card advantage coming from the graveyard. And that I found that to be very useful in giving the deck kind of a mid-range grinding element, while it's still one of the most aggressive decks in the format. But
you can have all of that. You can just it just seems like you're leaving money on the table if you don't play with something else that costs 1 besides Land or Elf. It doesn't have to be that. I mean, it could be something else like Oath of Impulse or something, right? But like you have to play some kind of card that costs 1.
I'll have to think about it. I have Blossoming Defense, but that's obviously not played on turn 1 very often.
No, not that often.
But yeah, I think this archetype is extremely underrated. We've seen versions of it for a few weeks. I initially didn't like it because I was like, oh, what do you do? Just get swept. You have Blossoming Defense and that's it. But you have so much durability because of Heart of Kirin and Ronus. Like Ronus just doesn't die to regular stuff. So unless you're just running all of your things into white 2, like he's probably not going to die. And you can just play this like slow progressive game, and if your opponent has a lot of removal, you can just lean on Scrap Heap Scrounger. There's tons of card advantage just passively coming from Merfolk Branchwalker, etc. And just like against creature decks, you're just like Ronus Galta, and they just don't attack you, and you just chip. You just like have 2 huge blockers, and then just like chip away with them for a turn or something, and it's nice.
Well, particularly if you. It's particularly if you end up in Heart of Kirin, because this is the type of deck that can actually get into a ground stall where your Heart of Kirin is actually playing offense and defense.
Yep.
You're flying in there for 4, like you said, and you're on defense, actually defending against whatever. I mean, this is like. Plus, I mean, Steel Leaf Champion is not exactly the most fragile threat either.
No, he's just solid. I mean, the thing about this deck is, whether you're going to choose this deck for a solo tournament, which is, the vast majority of the tournaments, or you're trying to figure out how to divvy up cards for a team event, this deck does draw on both Heart of Kirin and Scrap Heap Scrounger. So you have to ask yourself.
And I think it really needs it. I mean, I guess you could do mono green without the Scrap Heap Scrounger part, but like I do think it adds a really important element against the Fumigate decks.
Yeah, you have to say to yourself, look in the mirror and say, I think a 5/4 for 3 is better than Unlicensed Disintegration. If you're gonna go in this direction, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But you have to at least come to terms with.
Dude, I still think you're a little a little high on Unlicensed Disintegration. It's a good card and all, but is it even top 5 cards in Standard?
Yes.
Call.
I think it's... Well, let me finish on this one.
Please.
One of the things I love about this deck is that when you go after sideboarding, how we were talking about the black-red deck, kind of getting bigger and going mid-range and playing a lot of walkers? Like, The Walker Heart of Kirin interaction of this deck is insane, and if you want to play an attrition match, there's no better deck to attrit against other creature decks than this because of Lifecrafter's Bestiary. If you could just land second turn Lifecrafter's Bestiary with Llanowar Elves, like it's the opponent just actually has to run you over in a game where they've probably decided to also go slow. You're just going to destroy them probably. It's really, really not fair. You're drawing 2 cards a turn and deciding when you're going to draw a land. And your guys are all twice as big as theirs, like that. So,
is the matchup against red really so good? I mean, maybe your creatures are just so big that you can like get them that way.
I mean,
it just seems like the red decks have a ton of card advantage as well, and they can actually remove your Bestiary among other things.
I mean, other green decks can also with like Naturalize and Brontodon. Based on some conversations we had, I was playing as many as 4 Lifecrafters Bestiary, so you kind of draw them more. I think part of the incentive for me when I was playing is just you have cards like Galta, which are potentially very, very good, and certainly very good in game 1 where you're just like, they have a guy and you have a 12/12, right? But in sideboarded games where like maybe they have a ton of removal, like you can't even reliably cast Galta, so it becomes very, it's just a nice thing to be able to take out this card that costs a ton of mana and then replace it with these advantage-bearing cards. Certainly the games can go either way. If your opponent has like an artifact and like maybe like a Scrounger and a Heart, right? Your deck isn't very good at removing creatures. So they go like Scrounger, Heart, draw 2 unlicensed. You're probably going to lose that game just to tempo, right? But if the games just develop like I'm going to draw a card a turn, I'm going to draw a card a turn, and your deck has Llanowar Elf and potentially the ability to draw 2 cards a turn, you're just in a massive advantage against somebody who's drawing 1 card a turn. But it depends, if they're still all haste guys, then they might eat you.
Yeah, it's just so hard for me to take seriously the drawing more than 1 card a turn from a deck that doesn't have any Karns.
Well, I mean, that's fair, right? Lifecrafter's Bestiary and Karn are they're different.
Dude, what card doesn't work well with Karn?
What doesn't work well with Karn? I mean, just even permission spells are okay with Karn. They're not the best, but they're still okay.
Crushing Canopy is hot. Being able to kill a Lyra Dawnbringer, like sideboarding this in against Lyra Dawnbringer, but also being able to hit Search for Azcanta, Cast Out, Ixalan's Binding, any of that stuff. I
think its ability to remove enchantments might be even more compelling than its ability to remove flyers, but it's really there for Lyra Dawnbringer and the various other angels, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's got other removal spells for Lyra Dawnbringer as well, but I particularly like how flexible this is against, like, how often decks boarding in Lyra Dawnbringer put you in a real bind because they just don't have any other threats for you to be killing. So, like, if you overload on removal spells, you're going to often just be drawing dead cards, and they'll just win a long game. Whereas if you play too little, the Lyra will completely take over the game. The nice thing about Crushing Canopy is that it's such a smart hedge. It's it's a weapon against Lyra, but even if they don't draw the Lyra, you can put the card to good use.
Oh, sure, because they've got some kind of cast out or something that's still going to be in their deck. I actually thought that Vraska Relic Seeker did a great job in that slot. People who have Lyra are often tapping out for Lyra, and they tap out for Lyra. You can tap out for Vraska and then just be right back in it. I think this deck is surprisingly elegant, very surprisingly resilient, and much more competitive than I thought it was at first blush. But you can play all different kinds of Scrap Heap Scrounger, Heart of Kirin decks, and I think they're all pretty good. This one's my favorite though, just for funsies. Sure. I like it. Playing a 5/4 on turn 2, that's pretty great, and I love it. Like if you're just going to play so many games in game 1 are just like I'm drawing a card, you're drawing a card, and if you have a bunch of Explore guys, they just fall behind. It's pretty cool.
There's actually a perfect example. The finalist, Leo Lahanen, perfect example of the type of deck where this kind of hedge is so valuable. He's playing a blue-white control deck with 4 copies of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and a Gideon main deck to win with. And he's actually bringing some old stuff back. I mean, 2 pull from tomorrows is something we haven't seen in a hot minute. But this is a deck that has 3 cast out, 3 seal away, and 2 search for Azcanta. So there's already plenty of hits. And what's more, he doesn't even have Lyra. Lyra is one of the things that if you were just like, oh, I'm just going to be boarding in my Vraska's Contempts, because he's got Teferi anyway, and then it turns out that you discover that Leo's sideboard is History of Benalia, well, that makes it sure look nice that you boarded in, this flexibility.
So, I mean, is this the deck that changes everything? That's what I...
No, Lich's Mastery is.
Yeah? That deck is on deck for changing everything. But of decks that have happened already, is this the one that changed everything? Literally, the only way to win in the main deck is 1 Gideon of the Trials, and then... No,
that's not literally true. Teferi, that's the primary victory condition. Gideon is the backup victory condition.
You mean
I'm not even joking.
You just want to beat them into submission with Teferi? That's the... You still need a way to win.
No, you don't. You deck them. Teferi. So once you have them Teferi locked and you have the emblem, it becomes like you exile all of their permanents so that they're hard locked out and they can never get more than 1 land. And it's just you every turn exile the only land they had, so they can never get anything going, right?
Yeah.
But you eventually, once you have the game just sewn up, Teferi, put target non-land permanent into its owner's library, 3rd from the top.
You just
can just do that to yourself.
Like if you have 2 Teferis or something, it's just no big deal.
Yeah, anything you want. Once you get the deck set up, then you can just keep Teferiing your own land if you want. Not land, sorry, your own cast out.
Yeah, I think Teferi is the most convenient, but yeah.
Yeah, that's seriously it. I'm not even kidding. That's literally plan A. I mean, really, they concede. Once you have completely hard locked,
concede, right?
Right. Gideon of the Trials is definitely the backup plan. The real victory condition is Teferi and pull from tomorrow. Once you take over the game and you establish the Teferi emblem, it becomes trivial to beat them however you want. The Gideon just makes it, sometimes you got to make sure that you can actually win in time against another control deck. But this deck is set up to lock somebody out, hard lock. History of Benalia, because sometimes you got to go beat down.
Well, I mean, it's also an excellent set of blockers, right?
Yeah, it's a great card. Even after you sideboard, though, the plan is still to fairy lock him in a deck like this. And that's why I appreciate that he's playing 4. He really means it. The only other deck in the top 8, besides, that huge swath of red-black decks, the green-black Constrictor deck that finished 5th, Buzan's playing, Adventurous Impulse, which is something we've been seeing, but not really too much crazy stuff in the main deck. The biggest thing being just having going all the way up to a Vraska, even though it's main deck. And then the big tech is 1 Fatal Push and 2 Vraska's Contempt. This is just a lot less removal. He's just
so
leaning a little harder on Ravenous Chupacabra, Walking Ballista, and Vraska Relic Seeker, as well as the fact that sometimes you're just going to, go slug for slug, just pound for pound with Verdurous Gear Hulks. When was the last time we even saw a deck with 3 Verdurous Gear Hulks?
I think it's been a while. What's interesting to me about this tournament is there were so many black-green decks in the 8-0 bracket on day 1. There were several of the day 1 the undefeated decks were some version of black-green, and I think they got murdered by the decks that ended up being the red-black decks that all made top 8 because this is a good set of cards, right? These are all, you look at these cards playable, high playable, awesome. Is the range on these cards. Land of War Elves, I think, arguably the best card in Standard. But it's got Land of War Elves, Glintsleeve Siphoner, Walking Ballista, and those cards are to a man murdered by Goblin Chainwhirler. And if you have more than one, they're all getting murdered on turn 3 at once. What do you think about that? I think that's where the heads up is falling, unfortunately, for black green.
I don't super love green black right now. I really don't. It's okay. I just think it's a worse white black. But I don't know. White black obviously took a little
different. I think.
Maybe they kind of just play some. I mean, they are in that like the green black deck has this much more nut draw type of thing going with trying to like slam Winding Constrictor and Verdurous Gearhulk. But like, if you're just going to play some creatures in removal, what cards in this deck are even as good as the Chainwhirler?
Well, I mean, Llanowar Elves, I think, is one of the biggest incentives.
That's fair.
That's a good answer. That's a standard.
That's a really good. Okay, that's a really good answer. I got
like Chainwhirler has you so covered. That's the problem, right? Like, the thing that's interesting about Busan's deck is like no Explore guys at all. We often see as many. I think I've seen versions that have 12 Explore guys, not even 8, and this one's got 0. I don't know. Not having Explore guys actually makes you substantially better against Goblin Chainwhirler. But I don't know. What do you think about that? Would you rather have Explore guys or rather have some of these guys?
It's hard because to me, Jade Light Ranger is not on an equal footing with the black one. Like I would play. I really like Jade Light Ranger. I don't know. Call me crazy. I would play Jade Light Ranger in green decks, but I can't.
I told you I playing it in the aggro deck.
Yeah, I would play in the aggro deck too. I think Jade Light Ranger is a messed up Magic card. Not messed up enough to not play white black, but I think it's a messed up Magic card, and I would play it if I had forests in my deck. I can't speak for the other ones though. I can take them or leave them.
A Branchwalker's a very good man.
That's the one they all already play. I'm talking about the black one.
No, but Busan doesn't have any. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you were talking about 12. Right.
I'm saying I've seen 12.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I would play 12, but I think I would play at least Jade Light Ranger and in this style of a deck, Merfolk Branchwalker. Maybe not, though. I don't know. You can only play so many. I mean, isn't Glint Sleeve Siphoner better?
I actually don't know about that. Glint Sleeve Siphoner is outstanding against blue-white. It's outstanding against Approach, which nobody plays, right? But it's not very good against red. And like I think the Explore guys are much better. I mean, not that the Explore guys are so great against red because of Chainwhirler, but they're much better than Glint Sleeve Siphoner, right? Glint Sleeve Siphoner might never draw a card, right? And those guys will either draw a card or have a pretty good board position. And the Explore guys are actually excellent at compounding advantages. For example, if you somehow untap with a Winding Constrictor in play, an Explore guy is almost one of the best things that you can have the next turn, right? Immediate card advantage, yeah. And then possibly a ton of +1/+1 counters, right? That's just a huge advantage. It's like having a mini Verdurous Gearhulk already, and soft synergy with Rishgar. I think they're really good. So
I can believe it.
I think that if you play black green, like in your head, you're like before you enter the tournament, a big part of it for you is probably playing Glint Sleeve Siphoner, which is again, if you think you're playing against blue white decks, it's awesome. So
I mean, like you would want it against like the blue white Approach deck that won the pre PTQ in Roanoke, right? Marion Johnson's blue white Approach deck was a little Planeswalker heavy for most. He still has the Approaches in there and all that, but he's got 2 Teferi, 2 Karn, 3 Gideon, a Dovin Ban, and 2 Torrential Gearhulk. What a lot of proactive threats. And this is in a deck with 4 Settle the Wreckage, 2 Fumigate. How does he have the room?
Well, he only has 2 Approach to the Second Sun, right? Instead of often play 3.
No Seal Away or any other cheap removal. Yeah, his permission is just 4 Censor, 3 Disallow, and 3 Essence Scatter.
That's actually not that light, right?
No, not at all.
He doesn't have what's the Impulse Mana Leak Supreme?
Yeah, yep.
That one's often played in this archetype, but yeah, I kind of like this deck because it could just play like a really, really legitimate plan B. People don't like Approach itself because it's a 7, but I'm a little hesitant to play so many rando planeswalkers that aren't Teferi. He only has 2 Teferis and 1 in the sideboard.
Dude, Karn and Gideon are both really good and cost different amounts.
Yeah, I mean, I think Gideon is like very hot and cold in Approach. Like, it's awesome in some matchups, and it's just like I would have rather drawn a land all the time in other matchups.
Well, but once your deck is playing all these other planeswalkers, Gideon's not the worst for beating up on people. But the part that slightly troubles me, I don't know how much I love 4 Settle the Wreckage with a bunch of Gideons. But you get into some awkward spots, right? Like, if
they're not going to attack anyway, or
you can't suppress. Like, if you suppress one of their creatures, then they're always going to have a threat that they're already holding back. So, like, your Settle the Wreckage isn't going to get all its money.
Yeah, I think that that's not the end of it, right? Like, you were asking, like, how does he have room for all these planeswalkers? He only has 2 Glimmers and no Hieroglyphic Illumination and no Opt. Like, I mean,
just 26 land, do it hard.
Yeah, but I guess he only has 1 Search for Wisconsin, but like, it's just so scattered in my opinion. Like, if you're playing an Approach deck, the cards like Glimmer of Genius and Supreme Will are so. It's not that they're like vitally important to have in your deck, but they are so differently valued than they are in other decks. Like, having 2 of those means that you just stack Approaches in 2 turns, right? Like, that's a completely different math than how they're played in another blue-white deck. That another blue-white deck are like, oh, I'm just gonna Glimmer and get some card advantage, or dig for a land. No, once you've cast your first Approach, Glimmer is 4 cards, Supreme Will is 4 cards. You're there. It's over.
You don't have to activate Karn very many times to find your Approach.
Yeah, but you can really screw that up.
No, dude, you gotta count. You gotta count that.
I don't know, man. I'm seeing somebody screw it up. I would screw it up, or maybe not. Probably not. But
dude, I would definitely screw it up.
I definitely always keep a die when I cast Approach, a physical die that tells me where my Approach is. Do you think that's just like Bush League?
Dude, no shame in the game.
I literally do that. Like, I just
Kenji Samura would do that.
Yes, well,
if Kenji would do it, it's definitely good. So if we could actually skip over formats for a minute, there's a little bit different a thing. I don't know if you caught the Legacy Grand Prix. I was wondering if you saw the winner.
I saw the Legacy.
Yes, Gary Campbell's mono red prison deck, and man, does this deck have some stuff that might be relevant to your interests. This is one of those mono red decks with Blood Moon, Trinisphere, Ensnaring Bridge, Chalice of the Void, Magus of the Moon, lots of hateful stuff, right? And 4 Ancient Tomb, 4 City Traders is sort of some of the sauce with 4 Chrome Mox and 4 Simeon Spirit Guide for added acceleration. But he's got some new twists. Instead of 5s like Glorybringer or Stormbreath Dragon, any of that type of jazz, he's got 2 Karns and a Hazoret to help round out the 2 Pia and Kieran Noirs and 2 Chandras.
Well, and 4 Goblin Rabble Master.
Yeah, but the Goblin Rabble Master's the 3. Oh yeah, that guy's dope.
Just get a Chalice and Simeon Spirit Guide that guy out on turn 1.
Yeah, this deck is a deck that is set up to not need 1s or 2s. This deck can really put down a Chalice on 1 and a Chalice on 2 and love it. One of the keys is that one of the ways that this deck can take over is by skipping the 2 Chalice the second turn and going straight to 3 mana with Ancient Tomb or City of Traders. And that's to say nothing of the possibility of having both Chrome Mox and Simian Spear Guide. You could just play a turn 1 Karn.
Yeah, this deck it's got such exotic casting costs, all these 4s, etc., even though it only has 19 lands.
Sure.
So how about Fiery Confluence?
Dude, Fiery Confluence is a beating. This is that commander product. 2 red for choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Fiery Confluence deals 1 damage to each creature. Fiery Confluence deals 2 damage to each opponent and destroy target artifact. Can you imagine if this card was modern legal?
I mean, it'd be pretty played, right? Like, so one of its modes is literally just like 2RR, 3 to everything, right? That's not too bad. Like we usually pay only 3 for that ability, but not with this level of flexibility. How about that second ability though?
Deal 6?
Deal 6?
Deal 6?
I could get behind a 4. Let me tell you that.
Dude, there is not the least amount of Shatterstorm with destroy 3 artifacts.
Oh no.
And that's to say nothing of how often if you just deal 1 damage to each creature and destroy 2 artifacts, that you're killing 7 artifacts.
But not for nothing, this is only 1 more mana than a Shatterstorm for 3, right? So it's only 1 more, and you get deal 6.
Wait, Shatterstorm for 3?
I'm not sorry, Shatterstorm, sorry. Shattering Spree for 3.
Right, yeah, because Shatterstorm actually costs 4.
Yeah, so this is the same as Shattering Spree for 3, only 1 more mana, but you also get deal 6 as an option. You also get, Sweltering Sun or whatever is an option. Or mix it up. Mix it up. 1 to him, 2 to you, kill your Chrome Mox. I guess not Chrome Mox.
Probably not the Chrome Mox.
Yeah.
Dude, what about the Scab Clan Berserker out of the sideboard?
I have battled with that card on the Pro Tour myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to see the Renown showing up, Like if you can drop the Scab Clan Berserker early on and then use it as an combo card.
It's a solid, like you said, this deck doesn't want to play 1s and 2s, so it's going to play a lot of 3s that we don't typically see in Legacy, right? Like, it'd be weird if like a regular red deck were playing this card. That deck's all 1s, But if you're gonna jump the curve this way, you got to play something. The thing that maybe you want to play something that's hasty and aggressive. The thing that I would say is odd about this card in this deck is actually the double red, right? Where if you look at Goblin Rabblemaster, either Simian Spirit Guide or Chrome Mox plus Ancient Tomb or City of Traders cast this card clean, or you go like just Mountain, City of Traders cast this card clean. Scab Clan Berserker is actually a little unusually difficult to cast as a 3 for the. Not that it's so hard, right? But it is a bit different than. I
think it's surprisingly hard. You're really going to be playing it for 3.
Yeah, like it's legitimately costs 3. So that is the thing that I raise my eyebrow to. But just shout out to Sorcerer's Spyglass. That guy makes mono red, blue white, whatever deck you're in. Sorcerer's Spyglass doing it for you. And
dude, what about Sorcerer's Spyglass against Kess Dissident Mage? Did you see this Grixis deck? Janice Anderson busting out the Kess Dissonant Mage. Dissident. It's like 1 blue, black, red. So for Gwendolyn DeCourcy-esque mana, you get a 3/4 legendary creature human wizard. It's a 3/4 flying. During each of your turns, you may cast an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. If a card cast this way would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead.
So this is a cool card, right? It is kind of expensive for a fair card in Legacy. But the first thing I did after I saw that he was playing it was to only 3 Snapcaster Mage. That I thought was a little weird. What do you think about that?
Dude, Kess is a Snapcaster Mage.
It is, kind of, right?
Well, no, you just play it, and then you Snapcaster your Brainstorm or your Hymn to Turok. When you have 6 mana.
Yeah, I mean, but I like the one that costs, what if it's only turn 3 and you cast your Snapcaster Mage and get back your Brainstorm? Or perhaps Lightning Bolt, right? Those are good. Or
Dude,
Pyroblast.
This is a Snapcaster Mage that gets to Snapcaster Mage from now on.
I get it. I get this card. I thought it was kind of cool. It's like also a 3/4 flyer for 4, right? That's it's kind of, bodied up. I just thought it was weird to play
Legacy standards.
A second one without the 4th Snapcaster Mage. That was just me.
It's a lot bigger.
Yeah, and it's like much, much more mana. But it's also much, much more mana in a deck that has Jace the Mind Sculptor, Search for his Kanta. Like, there's a lot of like medium casting cost plays in this deck. I mean, I don't know. It's cool.
Medium is a good way to describe a lot of the plays.
Very medium. Can we just boomerang back to standard for a sec before we sign off?
Totally.
So you were talking about black-white a little bit earlier, and I just want to make sure that we just go over, what do you think a representative black-white is? Maybe, do you think...
well, I think there's a couple types.
Like, do you think like TBS's deck from the top 32 is a representative black-white?
So what do you like about, like, what do you see as the variation? What stands out to you as the atypical or any variation? What do you say stands out in TBS as the defining feature of this style?
Angel of Sanctions and third Gideon instead of any Lyris. There's no Lyris even in the sideboard of this.
Right. Well, it's kind of Angel of Sanctions is just kind of a dope card that people could be using. Right?
Yeah.
It's probably the defining feature of TBS's list, but this is still just a History of Benalia deck, right? I mean, a History of Benalia Karn deck?
I think that this deck makes really good use of a lot of the just basic synergies that are made available to the format, right? Like, Scrap Heap Scrounger and Toolcraft Exemplar with 3 power into Heart of Kiran is nothing new, right? History of Benalia can crew Heart of Kiran, by itself
sometimes,
given time, right? But the only thing I'd say that I don't like about black-white, right? Well, 2 things, right? It's less so with TBS's deck, but still relevant. If you think that black-red is going to be super popular, which it looks like it is, at least for now, man, Toolcraft Exemplar is yet another card that is just asking for it from Chainwhirler. And then committing 5 for Angel of Sanctions or Lyra against Unlicensed Disintegration, that's not the fight you want to be in my opinion.
I don't think that's unreasonable to want to stay the hell out of.
Yeah, so I get it. I know there's a lot of awesome players. It sounds like yourself included, like black-white. I don't know. I just be wary of those 2 cards right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind playing a black-white deck where I cut all the cards that die to the Chainwhirler and replace them with Lich's Mastery.
Yeah?
You'll see. Laugh it up.
Top Level Podcast.
Laugh it up.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, it's a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends were the key to find. Magic gave me purpose and drive. The game